Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay and today we are going to be making hanging framed pictures of a campsite with a night sky to put in our homes to make this summer feel a little bit more like camp and bring camp into our houses. The first half of this video we are going to talk about constellations and about some of the mythology behind constellations and how to identify constellations in the night sky. And then the second half we're going to actually make the craft. So hang tight, let's get through this constellation talk first and then we're going to get crafting. So while I've been home the last few weeks, I've made it a personal mission of mine to understand some of the things that I've never quite taken the time to learn, and constellations are one of them. So I've lived in Fishkill, New York for most of my life, and Fishkill is about an hour and a half from the city. It's just a little north of Westchester. So where I live, there are not too many buildings, there's actually a lot of farms, and there's not too much light pollution. The closer you are to the city, the harder it is to see the night sky because there are more lights surrounding us, so it's hard for the stars to compete with that. But where I live, I actually get a really good view of the night sky. So I've seen constellations my whole life, but I've never really understood them and I don't know how to identify them. That is, until today. So today I'm taking you on this adventure with me to learn more about constellations, to be able to identify them and understand the basic mythology behind some of our very common constellations in the northern hemisphere. Okay, so here's what I've learned so far. There are a few constellations that are visible year-round in the northern hemisphere. And it's important to keep in mind that we live in the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere includes North America, it's Europe, most of Asia, part of Africa, just a little bit of South America. That's all the northern hemisphere. It's the top part of the globe. And we see different constellations than the southern hemisphere, which is the rest of South America and Australia, Antarctica, a little bit of Africa, a little bit of Asia. So our constellations are completely different than the ones that you would see if you lived in the southern hemisphere. We're going to be talking just about constellations that you can see from where we live. Okay, so for this part, I drew some of the constellations so that I'd be able to show you what they look like when they're like removed from the night sky, and so I could kind of explain to you the mythology behind them. So here's our first constellation. It is the Big and Little Dipper. The Big and Little Dippers, whose real names are Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, are next to each other in the sky. If you can recognize one, you can find the other one at a slight angle nearby. The North Star, which you see right here, is the brightest star in the sky and is part of the Little Dipper. The next constellation I have for you all is Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is another constellation that is visible all year round. Cassiopeia was a vain queen in Greek mythology and was apparently sent to the sky as a punishment. She spends half the year upside down and is always visible in the northern hemisphere where we are. She is usually shown in pictures as sitting on a throne, and this is her throne, and she is brushing her hair. So that's Cassiopeia. Draco is another constellation that can be seen year-round. Draco is Latin for dragon, and if you look at the shape of it, he is definitely dragon-shaped. In Greek mythology, Draco was thrown into the sky by Athens when the Olympian gods fought the Titans. Draco got tangled up in the northern hemisphere sky and is still stuck there today. Scorpius is the last constellation that I want to share with you all today. Scorpius is a summer constellation that is only visible in the northern hemisphere from July through September. Scorpius is Greek for scorpion and is a zodiac constellation. If your birthday is between October 23rd and November 22nd, your zodiac sign is a Scorpio. All 12 zodiac signs are associated with constellations. This is only one of them. And you'll notice that Scorpius is scorpion-shaped with his tail down here, and up here his head and his claws. So those are just a few of the many, many constellations that you can see in the sky. I know for some of them it takes a little bit of imagination to see the shapes, to see the scorpion, to see the dragon, but the mythology behind them is really interesting and it adds to the story, and for me it makes it easier to actually see the constellations because I know what I'm looking for. I know that I'm looking for Cassiopeia's throne and that it might even be upside down. I know that the Big and Little Dippers will be right next to each other and that the North Star is part of the Little Dipper, and for me that's really helpful in learning the constellations. Okay, so let's get into the craft now. For this activity, you are going to need several different color construction paper. You will first need black, you will also need yellow, red, green, orange, blue, and brown. So you'll need all of those colors for construction paper. You are also going to need 3 popsicle sticks. Mine happen to be yellow, but they can be any color. You're going to need glue. I'm using flip-flop glue. And you're going to need scissors. In addition, you're going to need some type of string, which I'll pull out in just a second. Okay, so starting with my black piece of paper, which is the background of my portrait, because remember this is a night sky, so it's very dark, I'm going to put a layer of grass on the bottom to begin our campsite. So I'm going to take my green, and I'm just going to cut a portion of my green off so that it's the bottom of my picture. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about cutting maybe a third of this paper to be the bottom because I want to make sure I have enough room for my stars and the rest of my stuff. Okay, so at this point in the video, I'm going to speed through a few of the steps. I will show it all to you, so if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, you can, but also if you want to be creative and do your own thing, you definitely don't have to add all the things that I'm adding. If you don't want to add a tree, but you want to add a basketball hoop, please do that. It's your own campsite, it's your own framed portrait. And then I'm going to catch up with you at the end when I get to the constellations, and then we're going to do a challenge craft portion of this activity. So I will see you all in just a second. And I think the last thing that I want to add are the stars. So I'm going to pick one of my constellations that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to recreate that into the sky. So I'm going to recreate the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper into my picture. And the way I'm going to do that, you could do either, there are two ways you could do this. You could either cut stars out of your paper, or you could cut dots out of your paper if that's easier, just like circles, and create it in this pattern in the sky like this. I'm gonna try to do stars and see how that turns out. So you'll see here, my stars are going to be hysterically unique because stars are actually not that easy to cut out of paper. So they're all gonna look a little bit different. And then what I'm gonna do is after I get a few, I'm just gonna start gluing them into the sky in the shape of the Big Dipper and Little Dipper. So give me a second to cut all my stars, then I will be right back with you. Okay, so I'm going to have to change my plan a little bit because I didn't realize how hard it would be to cut tiny stars out of construction paper. So what I'm going to do instead is just make the Little Dipper so I can make the Little Dipper really big in the night sky. And that's my favorite one anyways because it has the North Star. So this is what my stars look like right now. I obviously still need to glue them all down, but you can see the North Star is here, and then this is the shape of the Little Dipper. I'm gonna add in the lines so you can see a little bit more clearly the direction that the stars go, so that the constellation is a little bit more distinct. So give me just 1 second, and then that will be done. So here is my completed night sky portrait. In it you can see I've labeled Camp Morty because that is the camp that I've created. Here I wrote Little Dipper, so I'd remember that this is the Little Dipper, and I even wrote Ursa Minor, so I would remember that the technical name is Ursa Minor. And I also labeled the North Star in mine. Obviously, if you did a different constellation, you wouldn't do that. But for mine, this is the North Star, so I've labeled it. And you could write whatever you want on the tent or not at all. I've also drawn on the fake wooden part a little bit to make it look a little bit more like wood. Okay, so now that we're at this point in the craft where it looks pretty complete, I'm going to challenge you all to take it one step further. Okay, so here's the challenge. I'm going to ask you to try to incorporate between 2 and 5, depending on what you've got, recycled items in your house. This can be bottle caps, this can be cardboard boxes, this can be cereal boxes, bottles, and find a way to incorporate 2 to 5 of these things that would otherwise just be thrown into the recycling into your portraits. So I'm gonna go find my things now, and then I'll show you what I'm gonna use, but try to be creative and try to use your own materials. Now, of course, if you don't have any recyclable materials right now, if there's not any boxes lying around, you don't have any bottle caps, this is something you can do later on too. It doesn't have to happen right now. Your portrait looks great the way it is. But if you have access to anything that you can add to this to make it a little bit more special and a little bit more your own, I'm going to ask that you do that. I'm going to show you the recycled items that I'm going to use in my camp portrait. But definitely use your own, use what you have, and if this isn't something you can do right now, just come back to it later. Hi guys, so we are outside. Here is my recycling can. I've just pulled a few items that would have otherwise gone to recycling that I'm going to incorporate into my craft. So first I have the Sunday comics. I think that the colors are going to go really nice. I don't know quite what I'm going to do with them yet, but I'm going to figure it out. But I really like the colors, so I'm going to use this. I have a regular newspaper too, in case I want to pull out some words or some of the pictures in here. I have a bag which was used for flour tortillas, but I really like the green up here. I think I'm going to use it to add on to my tree. I also found this Friendly's ice cream box, and I took a piece off of it. It says Big Chipper. Now my portrait has the Little Dipper in it, but I think Big Chipper is so ironic and so funny that I'm going to find a way to use this, even if I just get rid of Big and get rid of Chip and put a D to make it Dipper. I'm going to find a way to use that. And then I also have a Gatorade bottle cap, which I think I'm going to put on my fire to make my fire pop out. So we're going to see what that looks like in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward through the part where I actually make art out of all of this to show you all the final product, because you at home are doing the same thing but with completely different supplies, so you don't need a step-by-step of how I glued the newspaper or how I used the Gatorade bottle. But I will show you what I'm doing, and then I will show you the final product. So here we go. Okay, so here's what happened. It started to rain. So I'm just sitting in my garage now, and I'm going to continue with my recycle crafts. So let me speed through this, and then I will show you what it looks like in the end. So what I've learned today is that gluing bottle caps like this is really hard. So I'm going to give it a few minutes to dry and then continue this project. I'm also going to try to wipe up some of this glue because I've made a mess of it. But I will carry on. So here are the materials that I'm working with so far. This is still drying. It's looking a lot better, but the glue is still drying. For a dipper, I actually took the G from Big when it was Big Chipper, and I'm just turning it over and making a D. So I'm going to glue that down, and it's going to say Little Dipper there. I also found something in a newspaper that said summer camp, so I'm adding that in. And down here in the comics, I found a picture of a dog, and for me, I think the ideal camp setting would definitely have a dog. I'm also going to use this green here to use this plastic as a little bit of texture for the tree to make the tree pop. And that is what I'm working on now. So I've taken all of these things right out of my recycling bin, and now it's becoming art. Now remember, because we're taking our own recyclable items from our houses, our projects are going to look completely different now. So nothing that I'm doing has to be exactly what you're doing. You should be doing your own project right now, and I'm just taking you along for the ride of my project. So the next few clips I'm going to speed through so we can see the final result. Here is our final product, and I'm going to give you a tour of the recycled materials that I've used. Up here, this summer camp was from a newspaper headline, and down here this dog is from the Sunday comics. These two pieces of plastic here are from a tortilla bag. Dipper used to say Big Chipper, and it was an ice cream box. And protruding from the picture here is a Gatorade bottle cap, which is making my fire stick out in a 3D way. So let me show you the finished product hanging up on a door. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today and for learning about constellations with me. I hope that you can all take this information with you, and the next time that you have a chance to look at the night sky, you can look up and try to identify some of the constellations that we talked about. If you're really interested in this, there are a lot of really cool sites online, and there are also a lot of really cool videos that you can watch that are about constellations and about identifying constellations, and there are even apps that you could download that help you look at the night sky and figure out what exactly you're looking at. So it's definitely something to explore. I'm taking a lot of time this summer to try to learn more about this and to really try to understand the world. I don't know, try to understand constellations. While cleaning up, I realized I never used the blue construction paper. Why did I ask you to use blue construction paper? I thought maybe we'd put it in a pond. You could make your tent blue. I don't know, I just forgot the blue construction paper. Use the blue however you see fit. Like, it could be a blue ball, a blue bike, a blue blanket, a sleeping bag outside. You can find a reason to use blue. Or it's a pond. Blue pond. Use the blue construction paper.